Hi friends, how are you? It's your friend Maniza. I'm back in the house today because I have an idea I think you should try out if you're ever feeling stuck with your writing. Today on the Get Set, Ready, and Publish series, I like to talk about how you can write a poem even when you feel like there's a poem inside of you but you don't know where to put it. Now, how many of you have been on Twitter or have been on the interweb or on a blog where you find a poem from another poet, and after reading it and thinking about it, you are inspired to write a poem, and you want to add it to the poem has written to it. In this such case, we'll use Twitter for example. Many of you know that there are two ways to show that you like a tweet: by liking, retweeting, or quote tweeting. I know many of you know what liking and retweeting is, but quote tweeting, for those of you who don't know, is where when you before you send a tweet, you have to add something. You have to add in your commentary or about how you like something you read or about how something has inspired you. For instance, what I do is that whenever I stumble upon a poem written by my friends who are poets themselves, I sometimes will write a poem. I will contribute by adding a poem with their poem because of how they've inspired me. Ever since I started doing this exercise where I would write a poem after I am somehow been stirred or inspired in some way by another poet's poem, I then would write my own with the quote tweet. Now, before I move forward, I'd like you to remind you that you should always copy and paste it into another app. That way, if you ever would like to go back to the poem, you can. Now, after I retweeted after writing it, I realized two things ever since I started this small exercises. One, this is good for the mind. As poets, we need to be constantly stretching our muscles, not just our fingers, also our mind, because for us, we have stories inside of us. For us, poetry is a medium to express these stories. If we cannot find ways to tell our stories in a medium such as poetry, then our stories would A, they wouldn't be properly told, and B, the reader will not feel our story. And so being able to write a poem in regards to another poet's poem is one way to stretch your mind. Another reason why I think it's a good idea that you should contribute to another poet's poem is because you then start to create a connection. A connection? Yes, a connection. What happens is that you start to realize and you start to learn a little more about the poet you have either A, followed, B, have been looking at the work but have not quite followed, or C, you start to learn more about them because simply their work has inspired you or has made you think on more than one occasion. And 3, I know this may not sound like a reason, it can also become a fun process to help you write. Now, when I was doing this with the poets I know in my group of friends on Twitter at Master Maniza, I realized that when I was leaving a poem, I started to understand my friends more deeply. What I was able to do whenever I left a poem, I started to understand what the poet was trying to say in the poem. What's one thing every poet should know, sometimes the words aren't the only reason when a poem's being conveyed. Sometimes the feelings are there and we need to linger longer than 5 minutes to see it. Now, before I log off for the day, I'd like you to remember, why you should contribute to another poet's poem. 1, it is good for the mind. 2, you get to create a connection with another poet or writer. And 3, it is a fun process to engage in. Now, before I leave, I'd like you to come and meet my friends, poet friends on Twitter who are rocking in their world. You can meet them at Twitter, www.twitter.com/@MasterManiza. That's MasterManiza. If you would like to read more works by then yours truly, then come over to my blog on Medium. www.medium.com/@Maniza521. That's MUNIZA521. Also, if you would like to hear from yours truly, be sure to subscribe to Maniza Master. Don't forget, I'm always doing something new. You can receive videos on Wednesdays and sometimes on Saturdays. Also, if you love poetry and would like to hear my poetry instead of reading it, then hop over to my podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. Masterpiece, MASTERPIECE. See you soon, your friend Maniza Master.